Welcome into Line Change Action Network's NHL betting podcast. It's not Michael Leboff on the sticks today. It's me, Tim Kalinowski, joined by a very special guest, Carter Hutton. He's doing some great work over at Daily Faceoff. Really guess I should have started, though, the more meaningful part. 12 years in the NHL. You might remember him best probably for the Sabres. I know we have a lot of listeners up in the Northeast area, but some other stops as well. Carter, thank you for joining me. And I guess my first question that everyone seems to be asking after the Florida Panthers take a 2-0 lead over the Oilers is this thing over?
I don't think it's over at all. I think at this point, you'd be crazy to count out the Edmonton Oilers, especially with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and the fact that, they're heading home, and Edmonton is going to be buzzing. There's a lot of vibes in Canada right now around this team, and losing 2 straight obviously wasn't what they wanted. They played really well. I thought game 1 last night was a bit to be desired in a sense, but at the same time, this team has dropped 2 in a row a lot this year, and they've bounced back, and they can get streaky and win a lot. They lost 2 straight to Dallas to go down 2-1, and then they ended up winning 3 straight. So who knows? It's going to be a lot of battle. It's been a lot of fun so far, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of your expertise is in the crease, and that's where a lot of us in the media, that's about where our expertise ends, if you even want to call us having expertise at all. In this series, Bobrovsky has played well, but I don't really think Skinner has made any major mistakes. Have you seen a goaltending edge in this series so far? I mean, again, Bobrovsky playing well, but Skinner hasn't had that stinker, which makes you think, is it coming or is he past that?
And honestly, we're at a time of year where, of course, we don't want to see Skinner collapse and what we've seen in the past. And I feel like we're a little scarred by it, right? It's obviously a conversation that was had going into the series, going into the Dallas series with Oettinger, especially after Kellen Picard came in and kind of saved the day or steadied the ship, you could say, against the Vancouver Canucks. But for me, it's just the fact of Stuart Skinner hasn't made the couple big saves when he needed to, right? And Bobrovsky has. That's been the difference in this series. Not that Skinner's been bad by any means, but we're talking about trying to win the Stanley Cup, and your goalie has to be your best player. Majority of years, you look at the Stanley Cup final and teams that have won the Cup, I think maybe one of the outliers might be that Colorado Avalanche team with Darcy Kemper, where he was clipping along at like about a 904 save percentage when they won. Most years the goalie of the winning team is going to be in the conversation for the Conn Smythe. And I think for Skinner, he's been solid, but they're going to need him to get to a next level here, I think, in the next little bit to make a difference. But for the Oilers, 1 goal in 2 games against the Florida Panthers isn't good enough, that's for sure.
Yeah, and, shows what I know. Going into the series, I gave, a piece of betting advice on the Conn Smythe, and I said, the only person I really wouldn't bet is Sergei Bobrovsky. That is indeed what I said, because and now he's the favorite here. Minus 160 is what I'm looking at. And what I felt going in, Carter, is the fact that I felt that he had just kind of held serve, and that the team was so good defensively, so good in front of him, that, if he just took care of his business, he wasn't necessarily the story. Again, 2 games into this now, if you had a Conn Smythe bet, is it, or a pick rather, is it indeed Bobrovsky?
I think right now after games, the first 2 games, the way he's played, it'd be hard to make an argument. I think if they're able to shut this team down again and there's no scoring, Barkov has to be the guy, in my opinion, right? Like, you think what he's done against Pasternak, against, the Tampa Bay, pretty much their whole offense. And then in the last series as well, right? Panarin just non-existent, right? And so far he's done that, right? He has shut down 2 of the best players in the world. So that's definitely the argument. But then in the case of if they go up to Edmonton and they sweep this series and Edmonton gets maybe 1 or 2 goals in 2 games, now it's really hard to make that argument against Bobrovsky. So either way, they'd both be great choices. But right now I like Barkov. I think Bobrovsky has thrown his hat in the ring, just because of the way he played in game 1. I think that really propelled him in the situation where they were outplayed. He stole that one. We're looking back on last year. He was coming in. I think he came into the finals with like a 935 save percentage or something. Then he dropped down because he got shelled by Vegas, where last year he was the Conn Smythe winner if Florida was to win, for sure. Where this year, I think he's just had to do what he needed to do, right? You can't control that as a goalie. You don't know if you're going to get 40 shots or 10 shots or whatever's going to come at you. And I think so far it's just been, he's been kind of dealt that hand, right? Where this year there hasn't been many games he's been busy, where last year 14 to 18 games he had over 30 shots. So that's the controllables about goaltending. So for me, I think Bobrovsky's in the conversation if they shut it down, but I don't think Barkov can be ignored by any means.
Yeah, I know, and obviously the Barkov injury is going to be something to monitor here in the next couple of days. That's obviously a big one. Um, we get a lot of things wrong, right? Like I said, when me over here, not former NHL goaltenders, assess goaltending. For you, where do you start? If I was say, hey, how is this guy playing? What are you looking at? If my son was a goalie or something, I said, hey, take a look at him. It's funny. I have a buddy who scouts, and he scouts goalies, and he said, like, I can tell from someone's Instagram what they post. He's like, this guy's too deep in his crease. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I just stalked his Instagram and he's deep in his crease. Can you kind of get the same vibe?
Like certain feels, I've done some work with St. Louis Blues, like some scouting. So it's tricky to like know how a guy's going to turn out when you're looking at a younger kid, like, what's potential. Where I'm very good, not very good, that's not the right way to put it, but I understand the position where I can see holes in guys' game. And for me, the opposites are in this series where Sergei Bobrovsky does such a great job of just controlling his body and staying within his post. And then he has that capability to make those huge saves because he's such a powerful athlete and he can get around the net and he can recover quickly. Where Stuart Skinner, on the other hand, is when he's playing his best, it's a very simple, uses his size, stays within his post, doesn't really get too sloppy. He starts to chase the game a bit. That's when it gets ugly. And even last night, there was a few chances where, Ekblad had one where he walked right through the slot and he's like chasing it. He makes a great save on it. But when Stuart Skinner starts to chase the game and he's not really setting his feet, that's where he can get himself in trouble because he doesn't have that same athleticism as Bobrovsky does, where Bobrovsky can make those secondary saves. You look at even the save he made on Draisaitl from the goal line last night, where he's able to get across to that post, catch his post, but then like torque his body over, where like I'm watching that, like, and I know that feeling, right? That's hard on your knees, your ankles, but this guy takes so much time in the gym and taking care of himself, where he has that mobility at range end, where Stuart Skinner more is just going to be your more boxy, kind of let the game come to him. So we talk about depth. Skinner, I think, excels when he's deeper in the crease and the game's more predictable. When it gets a little bit east-west in the offensive zone, that's where Skinner starts to chase the game a bit. I think that's where he can get exposed.
Yeah. No, you bring up a good point, and I wonder too, what is something that you think that when we assess goalies that we tend to miss? Because for us, it's like, this guy's hot, this guy's not, this guy sucks, this guy's good. Obviously, that's not the entire story. What part of it do we miss? Is it how the team plays in front of them? Is it positioning? Where is that void?
Yeah, I think it is the way the team plays in front of them too, right? Because there are guys that can play when they get 40 shots, and then they can't play when they get 15 shots too. So I think there is that little, I always remember like the Ryan Miller trade when he went from Buffalo to St. Louis, where in Buffalo he was absolutely solid, and not that he wasn't good in St. Louis, but he struggled with it because it's a big adjustment, right? Where I find sometimes the guys that have a little more experience and the strength between the ears, in the sense of like Bobrovsky is a great example of it in these first two games, where, game one, he's in a dogfight, right? He's getting shots, he's getting breakaways. It's a busy night. And then you go to game two and he's quiet. He doesn't get a chance. And all of a sudden they come down and they score the first shot. Ekholm beats him on a weak goal. That's a bad goal. Can't go in, let alone in the Stanley Cup final. That can't go in the regular season. So how does he process that? How does he move on? How does he continue his game without having the floodgates open? And he did it right there last night. He stayed with it, made a bunch of timely saves. And again, it wasn't a night where he was, overly busy by any means, but he can't control that, right? So I think as maturity sets in, I think that's an important factor for goalies, is having that experience to be the same guy, whether you get 40 shots or you have a quiet night where you give up a stinker and, hey, I'm going to hold it here. I gave up that one, and that's the end of it. And I think that's where sometimes goalies with experience that can manage what their team gives them, has the best bet here moving forward.
Yeah, you mentioned the Ekholm goal. Bobrovsky did it last night, and Skinner has a bad habit of letting in the first goal of the game. And from your experience, do you see that? I mean, from obviously playing the NHL, but when you're playing in any level and the goalie, first goal of the game puts the red light on, for you as a goalie, you was thinking, oh shit, here we go again? Or, how the hell do you rebound from that?
I honestly think that's where the experience and maybe the sports psych side of it comes in a little bit. Like for me, I used to run hot. Like I always use an example when I played in college. We would like score a goal in college and I'd be celebrating in the corner, skating around, getting pumped up. Next thing you know, they're dropping the puck, and now I'm trying to like get back into play, and then maybe they come get a shot on me and I'm all over. So vice versa, when I would get scored on, I'd get all pissed off, whether it was my fault or someone else's fault. I just cared, right? Whereas I got a little mature and got exposed to different sports psychologists and tools, and trust me, I was never a guy that wanted a sports psychologist. I always thought like, I don't need that. That's for the weak guys. Like that's for the wimps. I'm like blue collar, like where then all of a sudden I started taking more pride in my game. You start learning more about these resources. It's just like going to the gym or taking shots. I'm just trying to beef myself up. So I think having that in their corner, right? If you give that first one up, of course you don't want to, but being able to reset and like put it behind you and move on and then focus on from there is, I think both these goalies have shown that they can give up a bad one or an early one and then not totally ruin the game for themselves.
Yeah, the sports psychology thing is interesting because obviously goalies are on their own island there. In terms of talking to a sports psychologist, they can tell you, right, hey, you need to be more even keeled. You can't be so hot and cold, stuff like that. Is there something a sports psychologist said to you or a method of doing so that was able to hit home for you instead of just like, again, yeah, I want to be more even keeled. I get it. How do I get there?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. That's tricky, right? Because it is a competitive sport and you run hot playing hockey, right? Whether you're a goalie or, you're engaged in a game that's competitive and guys are in your crease. And for me, what really set in was the fact of the matter was I would try to like almost over focus. So I say I was playing a big game and I would be like, okay, I'm playing Saturday night against the Leafs hockey night in Canada. And it's Thursday and I'm thinking about the game. Like, or maybe I drift there, right? I go in and out of it. You're like, man, what if we play brutal? What if our power play, what if they get on the power play, they get an early, you start getting all these like what ifs kind of in your brain and then, so as I learned to like compartmentalize that part of the game, maybe it was a little bit of breath work or understanding like I can't control that factor. I can't control if I go out and I give up 5 or if I get a shutout right now in the moment, like whether it's day before the game, the day of, until that game starts. So what for me, the biggest thing was I would go into those big games when I was younger and I would be wound so tight. I would want to play so well. I would almost overemphasize my focus. And then all of a sudden now you're almost drained, right? You can't be focused for 3 hours of a hockey game. As I learned to go in and out of focus, and I would always have a reset. Because when I'm at my best, honestly, I'd be joking around. Like I would come to the bench and laugh it up with the guys, have fun, do whatever I'm doing. Then I'd go back to the crease, and I ended up getting a little mantra that I would say to myself. And for me, it was in the moment, no distractions, play with an edge. So through a sports psych, we identified strengths in my game, things that like made me good at what I did. And then from there, I would use those to like refocus. So if it was a face-off and in the defensive zone, I would go through it, kind of refocus. Then if there was a timeout, I would skate or go to the bench on a TV timeout, be myself, have fun, instead of being like this guy that's just wound so tight that it's just you need to have flow, you need to have that. And I was fortunate to have a goalie coach named Martin Brodeur. I'm not sure if you know who that is, but not to name drop here too much, but he was our assistant GM in St. Louis. And we ended up firing Ken Hitchcock and Jim Corsi was our goalie coach at the time. And Marty came down to the ice and he really helped me with the mental side of the game. Just things he would do, even as the puck would cross the red line, just taking a breath in and a breath out to kind of calm myself instead of trying to be wound too tight, especially the way I played. I was very athletic and moved around the net. So I think those tools really propelled me from being, a borderline guy into a guy that could be a little more consistent for sure.
Yeah, I remember that news of Brodeur coming down, and I think watching NHL Network and him working with the goalies, and turns out it was you. I hadn't connected the dots, from a long time ago. But I think also too, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? When you see your goalie wound super tight like that, then you're kind of like, I don't even want to go near this guy. Kind of that, that creates that odd goalie relationship where it's, if this guy is just a little more talkative, a little more engaged, it's like, it creates that bridge. It eliminates that bridge of like thinking this guy's just absolutely out of his mind. Right.
I agree. And it makes you more approachable too. And then I also feel that when a guy is more of a team guy and a glue guy in the room in that sense, and you're more approachable, that if a stinker does go in, you're like, it's okay, right? Like we got him. He's going to be okay. Where if it's one of these guys that are super intense and fragile in certain moments, right? I've been on teams where guys have struggled and like the first goal goes in and you can literally feel the team deflate. Like I've been on the bench being the backup and, I'll try to be the cheerleader and get guys going, but like guys' eyes don't lie to them, right? They see it, they know, they're not stupid. So I think that's definitely a factor that goes into a team's morale when like the goalies are definitely wound too tight and it's not going well. That's for sure.
Yeah, he the backup thing. It was funny. I was look on your Twitter, and I found the like yesterday being the anniversary of you relieving I think Pecorine in a series against San Jose. What I've always wondered, okay, right? We all think watching at home when you're on the bench like that, are you shitting yourself? Like, I really have to come in here right now, cold, all this, or at what point in your career you're like, this is just business. I'm a pro. There's got to be some part of you that's like, are we serious right now?
Yeah, I think as I got older, I had more of that mentality. If there were certain situations I was going into, I was like, come on, man. Like right now, I just played. If I was playing a ton of games or whatever. But when I was younger, it was more adrenaline, right? It was just like, get in there. Like, once you're in, it's just hockey, right? It's stuff I was doing every day. I always found it more interesting, like from the training staff side of like the equipment managers, like if they're making a goalie change, I felt like they would panic more than me. Like as I got more mature, they'd be like, "Hey, Hutch, you got to go in. Like, where's your stick? Where's your helmet?" I'm like, "Man, relax. Like, they're not going to start the game without me." Like, as I got more mature, like, what are you stressing about? You're just going to stand here and sharpen skates and hand out sticks, man. I got to go do the work, right? So I think as I got more mature, I just would deal with it. Where early on, you're pretty aware of the situation. Granted, if it was an injury, you didn't know, it just happened. Where I've been around so many games, you kind of get a feel, right? You could tell how your partner was playing, or if a goal went in, or the energy of the team, or like, because there were some times where it's like, fuck, I don't want to go in, right? And you're looking down the bench, and you're like trying not to make eye contact with the head coach because you like know it's coming. He's just given up two, and now a third one went in, and you're like, oh god, I got to go in. I don't want to go in. I just ate a hot dog. I went out last night, or there's like so many different things that go on with, but we're so conditioned to play hockey that like once you get in there, it's just like riding a bike kind of thing.
Yeah, I always say that I feel like hockey players have this, and it's why like tanking or whatever is difficult. Like hockey players love to be so stupid. Like they just can't help themselves but play as hard as they can and believe they can win every night. Like it's like the most endearing thing. Like they just, oh, I'm in now. Well, like, what am I going to do here? Like not play? Like we're wired like idiots. You just go freaking play.
It's the truth. I feel like I had so many practices where I'd be like nursing something, or like say we went out the night before and you're like, hey, just don't be an idiot today. We got a couple of days, just take it slow, or and then all of a sudden I'd get in the pipes and it'd be like 45 minutes into doing battle drills and I'm still just giving her, right? It was hard to turn that up, but I also think that's what made me good at what I did, right? Like it made me get better and compete. And for me, I wasn't a draft pick or nothing. So I always had to like kind of fight and claw, or if it was like, I played for an organization and then they had a young guy that was coming. So it was like, hey, your time's up here. Then I'd go to another place where it's like, hey, we need you for a year or two until the next guy comes. So for me, I had that mentality. I think I built a rapport with teams where I was just reliable. Whether I was playing a bunch of games in a row or I wasn't playing, I didn't bitch or I didn't complain. I just went to work and did my job. And I feel like that wins over your teammates. But then in the same sense, it like made me a lot better at what I did.
Right. It's funny about a younger guy coming up. I'm a Bruins guy, so I see this all Mark Swayman thing, and I'm always interested in during TV timeouts and stuff where the starter comes over to the backup on the bench, and I feel like that relationship isn't always like all Mark Swayman. On both sides of the coin, when you were playing and when you were backing up, did you want to have a chat with the other guy, or is it light? Is it something like, what are you seeing? Oh, you're off your post here. What is that conversation like? And with the younger guy, are you like, I'm not talking to you, right? You're here to take my job. Does that change?
I think when I was younger, I was more competitive in the sense. I never definitely showed it, but I like internalized it. I would always be like a little bit of like selfishness and, wanting to succeed personally. And it's human nature, right? It's human nature to want to be good. Now having kids, it's human nature for my kid. I want my kid to be best at everything, but it's like, where do you put that, right? Like you can't show it in a sense, right? It's human nature, but I think being a good person, and as I got more and more in, and even if I was competing with a guy more direct, like when I was with Pekka Rinne, there was no competing, right? It was like I was making sure his coffee was warm between periods kind of thing, right? So, but I also felt like I knew how to read the room too, right? Like there's a time where a guy's dialed in and he doesn't want to talk and you're just there to put his water bottle on the thing and be his buddy. But then there's times where maybe he's fighting it and he needs you to be a sounding board, right? And I think it wasn't just for goalies, it was for everybody as a backup. At times I felt like I was the sports psych on the team. Guys would have a bad shift or the bad start to the period and they'd come off and be mad about something where I would realize the situation they were in, and then I could be like, I can either be like devil's advocate here, or I could be a voice of reason, where I always tried to err on the side of what's best for the team, right? And I think goaltending is one of those positions where there's usually just two guys, right? Granted, in the NHL, there's sometimes a third. Where I was in the American League, I really found like people being like, well, when are you going to be in the NHL? Or like, when, like if he gets hurt, you're going to get to play. He's been having a shitty year. Like maybe it's your time, you're playing well. So then it's like, you have these people around you that don't mean to be like negative. I feel like they just want the best for you because they know you and support you. Where if everybody that is around the person that's backing you up or competing with you is thinking that, it's not healthy in my opinion. So I feel like as you learn to like get away from that insulation and just be a better person and compete, where at the end of the day, you're truly competing with yourself. Like if I'm playing with Jake Allen in St. Louis and he plays shitty and I go in and I'm like, hey, I'm getting my chance, but I play shitty, that's not good for me either, right? So I think when I learned to just compartmentalize that side of the game and be like, hey, what's best for me and helping my teammate out, because as everybody does better, the team does better, it's great for everyone involved. So I think that is something that is hard in hockey because everybody is so competitive. And I feel like at a young age, a lot of parents and people and coaches, it's tough to get that into people's minds without the experience of like what I've gone through.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, as a high school coach myself, I find myself sometimes with the off-season stuff or whatever, and people are talking about this team, that summer program. Like, you guys realize, by the way, like we're here to win a championship during the high school season. Like, you realize we're playing for a championship, not just, again, for I hope I have a good night and that guy has a bad night. Like, there's still a ring and a trophy involved here, and I feel like you're saying, it can get lost even at the American League level and early in your NHL career.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the American League can be the worst league for it. Just the fact of like, you're making $50,000 a year. Like I was making $45,000. The one year I was on a 2-way contract making $600 in the East Coast and like 40,000 in the American League. And I had been up and down from the coast. I spent a while in the coast and I was up in Rockford when Chicago's farm team. And then all of a sudden you're in the NHL and you're making, $500,000. It's a big difference, right? So now you have this bottleneck of all the best players, all the guys from college, from major, junior, from different countries that are coming together, and they've all been the best players on all the teams they've played for, right? Coming to this point pretty much. And now all of a sudden it's a meat market of guys trying to make that jump to the NHL. So it can be one of those leagues that like, it can lose that team aspect in a way, but at the same time, like the guys that have a little more grit, and for me, I was never a big prospect. Like I got cut from my AAA teams here in Thunder Bay, where I was born. And that's why I dealt with some shortcomings. And I think when I got to that level, it really helped me because it was a sense of, okay, you're not playing tonight. You played bad. You're like, so I would just go back to work. I didn't like complain about it. I didn't call my mom, my agent, and be like, even my agent to this day always tells me I was like the most low maintenance guy I ever dealt with. Cause I just always felt like it wasn't in his control. Right. Like right. I needed him at free agency at times to knock down doors for me and like, help me get in the conversations. But like my play did the talking. Like if I'm going to call him with an 880 save percentage, like what the hell is he going to do for me? Right. Like you have to take the onus on yourself, where sometimes these younger guys that have never had shortcomings, right? You've always been the star. Now all of a sudden you're at a league where you're like, there's guys that are better than you. You're not on the power play. You're not on the first line. And like, you can't call your mom and dad because they're not going to call the coach and bitch and complain. Right. So the quicker you can learn to deal with that and become a man. And that's where I think like sports psych and all of it mixes together in like the off the rink character, right? Where like you hear John Cooper talk about it and Paul Maurice, like when the players start to police themselves, even Craig Berube talking about that. I heard a quote on Sirius where, when he creates a culture where players hold each other accountable, where like, it's not a coach telling a player like, hey, we don't do that here. It's another player telling a player. That's where I think you really start to gain the championship feel and create guys that, build a good culture, where I think you look at all these teams that are consistently pretty good. They've got that in place. So then like when the next guys come up, it's just like, hey, this is how we do things here.
Yeah. And obviously easier said than done with, building that culture kind of comes organically because it's hard to be like, we're going to police ourselves when we suck, and then it becomes, the wrong message. It's certainly something, again, with the little coaching I'm involved in is one of those things that's like really difficult to instill. And hockey being a game where I think a lot of why we see our stars or our leagues struggle to market themselves at times is because of what you said in terms of our play needs to do the talking, because when you're not playing well, you feel like shit. You don't want to talk. You don't want to be boisterous, and it's awkward to market yourself when you're like, yeah, everyone in the room knows I suck right now. So how am I going to talk about how great we are, the sport is, everything like that, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. But it's one of those things, I think they're like misery loves company too, right? So
Right.
if you can be a guy that can stay positive and find a way to, because I had a goalie partner in college who's like still a really good friend of mine, and we're good friends on and off the rink, but at times could be, a bit negative, right? And we split a lot of games, and at times if things weren't going well for him and me, I would find myself in these little pity parties, right? Where it'd be like, he's complaining about something, and I would just like, I would jump on board with it, but I always would catch myself, right? And then I think as I got more mature, I'm like, this isn't who I am, right? Like if things aren't going well, like don't worry about other people or other things, like control what I could control. So I think like when you can find that honesty factor in your game, on and off the rink, it just helps you grow as a person and as an athlete.
Yeah, I have to say, I have a couple more for you, and I can't help myself but ask, as a guy from Thunder Bay, how do you end up at UMass Lowell?
So yeah, okay, yeah, this is a long story. I feel like I could be in like a short film here with how my career worked out. So I played double A all the way up. I don't know how it works here is there's one triple A organization that is at like, every second age. And that's kind of the team to play. We've had a lot of pro players come from here. I played double A. So I'm kind of the outlier that never played for this one rep team, the Thunder Bay Kings. And, I ended up aging out a midget, and I went to junior. So I played in a local junior A league here. I played 3 years. We were horrible. My first year I played on a team. We went 5-39-4. So you can look it up on Hockey DB. My stats are so funny. It's like 5 goals against the game. And I ended up got traded to a better team. And in my 20-year-old year, we went to the Royal Bank Cup, which is now the Centennial Cup, which is the junior A championship of Canada. And then from there, I was kind of done. I was ready to play junior B the next year as my overage year at 21 and go to school. I was going to get a job with the local telephone on the line crew. This was like my plan for life. And we ended up winning the Dudley Hewitt Championship, Dudley Hewitt Cup, which is like Ontario to go to there. And we won 7-6 in overtime. And all year I was rock solid my 20-year-old year. I had a really good year. And so we end up winning 7-6. I laid an egg in the final. I played brutal, but the team put up 7 in overtime for us to win. And then I got to go. So if I lose that game, my career's over. Pretty much, we don't go to the national tournament. Then in the national tournament, I got scouted by UMass Lowell. They were losing to goalie. Jerry Ford, who still works for the Sabres now. He was with Niagara at the time, but he knew the head coach was looking for a goalie at Lowell. Passed my name along, and next thing you know, I went to Lowell. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I didn't know what Hockey East was. I didn't know. Like, honestly, I was so green, man. I didn't have a cell phone when I moved to school. I was just this, like, blue-collar kid from T-Bay. And then from there, once they got their hands on me with, like, how a Division I program's run, that's when I really, really took off.
That's funny. Yeah, UMass Lowell's, just about 45 minutes north of where I live outside Boston. So I fully you did get that blue collar there in Lowell, and I'm sure that filled a little bit of that for you.
Yeah. That was, I think looking back on my career, the way it turned out, I was like, we'd go to these other schools and I'd be like, man, these are schools where we were partying on University Ave, like a backpack full of beer, going from party to party, just like in grimy basements. But it is what it is, right? I made the most of it. It was almost better I didn't know the other side of how fancy some of these universities are in the States.
I appreciate, appreciate all your time, Carter. It's been fun for me to just learn more about the position in your career. Before we wrap here, when you said fighting it a couple minutes ago, I thought of Darnell Nurse, and I know he's banged up now, and Cody Ceci. What's it like when your defensemen in front of you are fighting it pretty hard? Do you try and give them encouragement? Are you like, when they're on the ice, are you like, oh boy, I got to make sure I'm a brick wall here? And does the coach ever even ask you, like, what are you seeing in front of you? Is it as bad as the numbers seem?
Yeah, no, like no coach would ever say something to you, but you pay attention. When guys are struggling. I think for me, I've dealt with that in the sense of, you're usually super aware of who's on the ice for the other team. especially if they have guys that can shoot the puck and score, and you got to be conscious of that. But when a D pair is struggling, it's like, the chances are going to come, so you have to be ready. And you feel for those guys, right? Because it's a thankless position, right? Like everyone thinks like playing, a 5-6 pairing or whatever it is, a simple D game is easy, and it's not, right? Especially when you're fighting it. So I think as a goalie, you just have to have that mindset, like controlling what you can control. But at the same time, you got to be cerebral. You got to know who's on the ice and be aware of the situations. And I think, hopefully it cleans up here. CC out of the lineup last game. Nurse looks like he's hurt. So who knows what lineup we're going to see in game 3.
Carter, you've been an absolute joy, an absolute pleasure. One more for the road here. Yes or no question, are the Oilers coming back?
I honestly think they're going to come back. I don't know if they win this series, but I can't see them getting swept here, especially 2 at home. I want to see that. Maybe the hockey in me, the Canadian, I just want to see a good series too, right? I hate to see it just get swept.
I do too. We do all this for this many months in a row, and we want a good ending. So I'm on the same page as you. Carter Hutton doing some great things over at Daily Faceoff. 12 years in the NHL, a complete joy. We'll see you next time on Line Change. Carter, appreciate you.